All right, welcome everyone to our webinar on Questbridge and Essays Live, hosted by two of our virtual advisors that I'll let introduce themselves. We should be live on Facebook now, and we are recording. So I'll hand it over to you, Juliana and Sarah.
Hello, everyone. So to get started, we're going to introduce ourselves and just talk a little bit about College Advising Corps and its mission to increase the number of low-income, first-gen, and underrepresented high school students who enter and complete higher education. Our team of virtual advisors works within the College Point initiative and is supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies. And College Point is a virtual advising program that helps high-achieving, low to moderate income students apply to college, find scholarships, navigate the entire financial aid process entirely for free. This is our first live of the new application season, and we're going to be having these throughout the year on topics like financial aid, Fafsa, scholarships, all those types of things. And if there's any topic you're interested in seeing in the future, make sure you comment on Facebook or leave it in the YouTube section, or you can respond in the chat. Yeah, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified when we go live in the future. So to introduce myself, my name is Julianna Avery. I use she, her pronouns. This is my third year advising, and I went to Guilford College where I majored in political science.
And hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Clark-Shamet. I use she, her pronouns. I am a third year e-advisor as well. I attended North Carolina State University. And something a little bit more special, the reason why I'm on today is because in college, I worked at the University Tutorial Center at NC State as a writing consultant for both graduate and undergraduate students. So I'm here to talk just a little bit about essays as well. So first up, here is what we will be covering today. First, what is Questbridge? Who qualifies? What does the timeline look like? Tips and suggestions for how to make your essays stand out, and that's going to be both for Questbridge and for your general college application essays. After each section, we're going to take relevant questions, and at the end of the presentation portion, we'll respond to questions as well, so I promise you that we're not ignoring you if we don't respond right away. Additionally, we have some of our advisors that are off screen helping us to respond to questions, so you might see responses from Gabby, Warner, Shelby, Toby, Jack, and Destiny. And finally, any inappropriate comments or questions will be deleted and kicked off of the Zoom call and or blocked from our social media accounts. We will end today with just some frequently asked questions as well. So, Questbridge National Match Scholarship is a scholarship program for high-achieving, low-income students that are essentially awards eligible for students to have a full ride for 4 years to one of their 42 partner colleges. Questbridge has a ton of really incredible college partners that you're able to apply to through the Questbridge application. They have a mix of both Ivy League schools as well as smaller, lesser-known liberal arts style colleges, and the locations really vary, so they're all over the country, really.
And applying to Questbridge is like applying to multiple schools' early decision. And so one thing that sometimes makes students nervous is the binding nature of the scholarship. So if you apply and you end up getting matched, you are binded to go to that school, which can be a little intimidating for some students because it is, you're committing to that school for sure. Matching is something we'll go over a little bit more later, but essentially means that the school's accepted you and is committed to giving you a full ride for all 4 years that you're there. And we'll also be talking about what the Questbridge regular decision process looks like, if that is an option for you, if you are selected as a finalist, but you don't end up matching to a school.
So the ideal Questbridge candidate is a student who would be 100% happy going to multiple Questbridge partner schools. If you have a #1 dream school and would be disappointed not being able to apply to schools outside of Questbridge, then this scholarship might not be for you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about qualifications and important information that you need to know if you're going to apply. The ideal candidate is going to be a high-achieving, low-income student, and I'm going to review some of the qualifications that Questbridge has put out, where they suggest that these are like ideas and suggestions of what the requirements look like, but none of these are hard limits. So if your family makes a little bit more money or your GPA isn't quite as high as they normally ask, don't cut yourself out or count yourself out. And definitely talk with your advisor to see if Questbridge is a good option for you. So academics, typically Questbridge finalists are in the top 5 or 10% of their graduating class. They receive primarily A's in the most challenging courses available. So if your school doesn't offer like honors, AP, or IB classes, don't feel bad about that. Like, you can't control that. As long as you're taking the most challenging courses that are available to you, that's what they're looking for. Typically, SAT scores, they're looking for 1310 and above, or ACTs that are 28 or above. However, this year's been really different because of COVID-19. So a lot of schools that are partners are test optional this year, and they understand that circumstances are outside of your control. If you haven't been able to take an SAT or an ACT, or if you were only able to take it once and didn't get the score that you were hoping for. All applicants, if you do submit a test score, it'll be an unofficial report that you use, so you don't have to pay to send it into Questbridge.
So in addition to there being academic qualifications that Questbridge has, there are financial requirements as well. So they're looking for students who come from households earning less than $65,000 annually for a typical family of 4, and that would have minimal assets. Types of income include, but are not limited to, tips, alimony, child support, rental income, farm income, retirement distributions, and just other various types of income that might be special situations. If you feel like you're low income though, and that you've experienced financial difficulty, that's key for this financial requirement, because it is not a hard cutoff or requirement to be from that typical family. It can be a little bit flexible. They also consider first-gen status, which means that if you're the first person in your family to go to college, that is something they'll consider, as well as extenuating circumstances and extracurricular achievements, because they really want a holistic picture of who you are and your experience as a high school student. So as a reminder, after each section, we'll take relevant questions, and at the end of the presentation portion, we'll respond to questions as well. So we also have some advisors who are off screen who are responding to questions, but I think we have one in a couple that we can answer. Julianna, do you want to take the first one?
Sure. So I see that we've got a question about how certain states and regions are more expensive to live in, and will Questbridge take that into account? Absolutely. Like, if you live in New York City and you make more than $60,000 a year, Questbridge is definitely going to understand that the cost of living is much higher than it would be for someone who's in a more rural area in like Georgia or anywhere else in the country. Questbridge is really, like, the reason why none of their suggestions are like hard cutoffs is because they understand that like life is complicated and sometimes things look different than they actually are. And so again, if you feel like you've experienced difficulty because of your financial status in life, like, definitely look into Questbridge and see if it's a good idea for you, and talk with your advisor.
And then Sarah also asked another question: what does minimal assets mean when it comes to Questbridge? And this is a great question. There's no exact rule on what exactly this means. It's taken into consideration through Questbridge, but they're looking for students and their families that don't have a lot of what we would consider to be financial assets, which could be owning a home, owning a car, multiple cars, or owning a lot of land. And I think that it's really decided on a case-by-case basis, and it might just be best to talk with an advisor or your guidance counselor to see what really might count as an asset for your family, and figure it out on a case-by-case basis.
And I see that Amy asked about score reports. Are you talking about like SAT or ACT score reports, or like AP testing? But regardless, I don't think it would render your application useless, especially because they're not requiring the official versions. So if you want to like log on to College Board on the ACT website and see if you can find an unofficial report that you could take screenshots of or share that way, then I would definitely like explore and see if any of those are available options.
And I'll go ahead and take Amy's question, Amy Kim's question, the first one, if we've got a little bit of time, I think. So which part of the application do you think is most important? Is that going to be stats, rec letters, essays, etc.? And what we like to think of an application as is sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. So each different portion of that application is going to hold a different and sort of equal weight, so that it all just fits together kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. This year, obviously, test scores are going to be a little bit different, so I think they're going to be weighed a little bit less than they would be in previous years. And there's the potential that essays will weigh a little bit more. So I think you should just proceed with paying equal attention at this point to all of these different pieces of the puzzle.
I love the puzzle metaphor. Sarah, that was nice. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the next stage, which is the timeline and just like how you go about applying, because sometimes it can get a little confusing. So the first deadline that you need to know about is September 29th, and that's when your application is due. And so all the essays, supplements, and your recommendation letters for the Questbridge application are due on the 29th. And something I tell my students every year is not to wait until the 29th to submit it, because in previous years, that's happened a couple times. And sometimes Questbridge's system gets overwhelmed and it may move slower, or it may shut down for a little bit. So definitely do not put yourself in a situation where you're pressing submit 5 minutes before midnight, because it's just a lot of stress and you don't need that in your life. And then October 15th, your ranking list is due. And so ranking is basically where you get to list up to 12 of the Questbridge partners that you would be interested in going to. And you're going to want to rank them in order of preference. So if Hamilton College was my top choice, it would be number 1. And then if I like Grinnell, it could be number 2. And then Yale could be 3, and just so on. And you don't have to rank all 12. I could decide I only really like 7 of these schools, and I can only see myself really thriving at 7 of these schools. So I'm only going to list 7. You could even only rank 1 if you wanted to. And just remember that this is a binding process. So for all of these schools, except for MIT, if you put them on your ranking list and you get matched to them, then you have to go there. MIT is not binding, so you do have until May 1st to decide if you want to go there, and you can apply to other schools, just to make it a little extra complicated. One thing I also really want to reiterate is the importance of not ranking a school just because you think you would like it, or because you've heard about it a lot in culture. Yale was on Gilmore Girls, Yale sounds like a really cool school, but I really don't like cold weather or the rain or Connecticut, so I shouldn't rank Yale. And just making sure that you're doing a lot of research before you submit the rankings list on the 15th. And then on October 21st, finalists are going to be notified. And so you're going to find out whether or not you're going to keep going in the Questbridge process. And if you're not a finalist, you'll still have enough time to apply early decision or early action to other schools. And you can do that through the Common App. And also just Questbridge is really competitive, and you not becoming a finalist is not indicative of your intelligence or your possibility of getting into all of these schools. And you should keep going, because you've got great things ahead of you. On Friday, November 1st, finalists will submit the match requirements for the schools they did rank. And so you'll notice that's really close after October 21st. So don't wait till you're a finalist to start working on all the supplemental materials. Otherwise, it's going to be a really hectic couple of days. And so you're going to need to fill out FAFSA if you're eligible to complete it, the CSS profile, which is another financial aid form that's pretty involved. Any other extra financial aid forms, so Princeton requires one specifically for them. And then some of them will also require the Common App. And if you want to go view and see what each college needs, you can go to the Questbridge website and click on their pages specifically and see, do they have essays specifically about why Princeton? Yeah.
All right, so now we are going to move in and talk a little bit about essays, and I'll give you some tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the years on how to start essays, how to navigate this college application process with essays. So these tips and tricks will work for both your Questbridge essays, also for different supplemental essays, and even just general college application essays. You can also just use them for your English class too. So if you're feeling stuck on getting started, and you're really just not sure if you're putting it off, starting an essay, just start writing. I promise it helps. Remember that you can't edit a blank page, and a lot of writing is actually going to be the revision process, going back over thinking about what you've written and if it works. So my second point is revision, revision, revision. Don't underestimate the power of revision. It's also really important to give space to your writing to make sure that you can come back at a later time, so that you can really think critically about, is this achieving what I want in this piece? Is this conveying my thoughts and feelings in the best way possible. So try to give yourself at least 24 hours before revising what you wrote, just so that you can come back with fresh eyes and really think critically about your piece. Third, the content of your essays, especially when we're talking about college application essays, should include what we call core values, which are really the ingredients that make up who you are as an individual. So colleges want to know what is important to you, what do you value, what would you, fight to the death for when it came down to it. So some examples, these are mine, but helping others, peace, self-love, adventure, and mindfulness. These are things that I really value really highly. So you can see how I might be able to start creating an essay and incorporating these values about the time I went on an adventure, how I enjoy helping others. And you want to make sure that these stand out specifically to you. A great writing piece that people like to say, if you dropped your essays, if you dropped your college application in a school hallway, would somebody be able to pick up that packet of information that didn't have your name on it and be able to identify this and be like, oh yeah, this is Sarah. I should return these to her. So think about that when you're writing your essays a little bit too. And then last but not least, my big final piece of advice is probably one of the most important. It's probably one you've also heard before from your English teacher. If you haven't heard it quite yet, you'll hear it this year. Showing and not telling. So instead of telling you how this works, I will show it to you right now instead. So here's an example of telling. The house was really old. And then here's the example of showing. Every inch of the house was covered in ancient and disturbingly sticky wood paneling, with stains left by occupants probably decades before. So you can see how there's just so much more information in the showing portion. It really brings alive. You can think about it in your mind and be like, oh yeah, I can see this. There's a house on my street that kind of looks like this maybe. Or like this is a haunted house type of feeling. So you're really able to convey so much more information than just the house was really old. And that's it for tips and tricks. So pass it back off to Julianne.
Thank you, Sarah. So next on the timeline is Monday, December 1st, finalists who rank colleges will find out if they are matched. So if you do match, congratulations, you're done. If you don't, try not to get discouraged, because you're able to go through the regular decision process with Questbridge, which is really interesting. And every single year, I always have students who end up getting into schools that are Questbridge partners through the regular decision process. And not matching doesn't mean that you're not going to get into those schools. Like in 2019, there were 14,926 applicants, 5,842 of them became finalists, and then 1,127 of them matched. So it's a very competitive scholarship. But basically how the regular decision process works is it's non-binding, and you're also able to join the Questbridge network of scholars. So everybody else who is a finalist, like this year when you're applying, but also all the previous years of Questbridge, are all connected and have a network, which will be helpful when you're looking for internships or jobs in the future. You have the added distinction of being a finalist on all your applications. And then also all Questbridge partners meet 100% of need, which means that you have a very good chance of receiving a good financial aid package from them, even without the scholarship. And you can apply to any of the partners. You're not like limited to just the ones that you ranked. So, and then Sunday, December 9th is when the regular decision form is due, saying that's what you're going to be doing. But now I think we're going to move in and answer a couple more questions, because we see we've got a lot in the Q&A feature. Sarah, do you want to take the first one?
Absolutely. So the first one is, are colleges notified of where you rank them on your list? And they are not notified. They have no idea where you put them. So you could be matched to your first one. You could be matched to your last one. They have no idea what you think of them.
Okay. I saw a really good one. Okay, can we still apply early action to a school through the Common App if we rank schools? And this is going to have a complicated answer because it's yes and no. So their early action policy is that you may apply to any college or university early action if you have to apply early action in order to be eligible for certain scholarships, as long as the admissions process is non-binding. Or you can apply early action to your at-home state public college or university with a non-binding application, as long as Questbridge doesn't violate the college's policies. So sometimes colleges, like your public in-state school, could have something saying you can't apply to something else early. So just make sure you're looking at all of the policies when you're juggling the early applications. And then, yeah, you can apply to any school that has a non-binding rolling admissions process. So that's kind of confusing, but yes and no.
All right, we have another question. Is there a non-binding version of Questbridge? And the answer to that is not to my knowledge. Unless you're applying to MIT through Questbridge, which is a non-binding process of applying through Questbridge. Otherwise, you would just be applying to colleges and universities and then other scholarships outside of like a general program. There are a lot of other great scholarships out there, so I recommend that you look and see what other large scholarships that there are out there. If you are currently not a high school senior applying this year, this application cycle, it's possible that Questbridge might change for next year potentially and have more schools that are non-binding, but put a wait and see on that.
So I see a really great question. Do the schools that you rank affect your chances of becoming a finalist? No, because the finalist application is reviewed by itself. So once you apply to be a finalist, like they're just looking at the people who want to be finalists. They're not looking at your ranking yet. And then your application is going to be sent off to the schools. And something I really suggest is that oftentimes schools like the Ivy League or like Stanford are really, really popular. And so definitely look at some of the smaller, lesser known schools because they're all incredible institutions. And, you know, if the majority of students are ranking Stanford's going to be really, really competitive. Whereas if a lot of people don't know about Hamilton, like it's still very competitive, but like it would be a smaller pool of people that you're in.
All right, another great question that I'm going to take because it has to do with essays. So a lot of essays I have read usually are at one point in time. What if the essay is more of a timeline of events/growth with a connecting component throughout? So this is a great question because there's so many different ways to write an essay and so many different ways to make it be really successful. So yes, writing about one point in particular in time is a really great way to structure your college essays, especially when you only have a little bit of space. You're able to show so much more of that showing instead of telling at one time in one essay. But it's possible to have a timeline of events growth over time because there are questions that are asking, how have you grown over time? What have you learned from one specific situation? So it's definitely possible. I would think that you would just want to consider what's the prompt asking and is this type of style for this essay appropriate for that prompt?
So I see a question saying, if we rank schools and we don't become a finalist or get matched, can we still apply regular decision? So you're not going to be able to apply regular decision through the Questbridge application. However, you can still apply to those schools through the regular decision process, like the normal one through the Common App or through the Coalition or whatever they use. And you could also, you will have enough time if you wanted to and you knew, like, I keep going back to Hamilton, but if Hamilton was like your top choice school, you could even apply early decision to them or early action. Like you'll still have time to make that decision and get your applications in.
Another great essay question we're going to tackle next. Is it recommended to incorporate academic accomplishments into the essay? And this is actually a really common question that I feel like I get asked. And the answer is a little bit complicated. It's yes or no, depending on the situation. Does it make sense for the essay? Then definitely include it. If a time where you grew from a situation was because you joined student body, student government, then you can definitely feel free to incorporate that. What becomes a little bit trickier in an area where you want to shy away from is when you are just padding that essay with everything you've ever done and how great and awesome you are, because remember, a college is also going to be looking at your college resume that you've created, and so you'll be able to showcase all of those achievements and all of those activities, and that way you don't need to like force them into an essay.
So I see a great question from Wisdom about, if we get matched to a university, are we bound to that university for our whole undergraduate career? I don't believe you are, but your Questbridge scholarship would not go with you if you transferred to another school. Also, something that's really great that all Questbridge partner schools have is once you get matched, there's like a cohort of all of the other matched students at that school. And so you really do have a strong sense of community, and you're going to, like, a lot of times in normal situations, they'll have all the Questbridge students come to campus during the summer and like take early classes together. So you get to know your classmates, you get to know your professors, and you also get to know like the Questbridge Center. And so there's a lot more support systems available when you're a Questbridge scholar than normal. But if you did end up going somewhere and you didn't feel like it was the right place for you, I'm sure you would be able to transfer, although I haven't had that experience with anyone yet.
So, great question about financial aid now. What is the difference between a full ride scholarship versus 100% need met financial aid? And this is kind of a complicated situation, I think, for a lot of students to kind of understand, because we hear a lot about what full ride scholarships, what does this mean? So a full ride is where everything is completely covered by the college or university. It's normally, I do believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Julianna, tuition, fees, room and board. Everything's covered. And then 100% need met financial aid or need-based financial aid is where a school takes into consideration how much they think that you can afford to pay to go to that college. So if we're taking a random student, for example, student A, perhaps their family can afford $2,000 for them to go to college for that year, then that college or university is going to cover everything up to that $2,000. So if Harvard estimates that it costs $80,000 to attend Harvard, they're going to cover in a lot of different ways $78,000 of that, so that the family truly is only paying what they can afford, which is that $2,000.
Also, something I think that makes Questbridge different from most scholarships is that they think about, like, how much is your medical insurance going to cost? How much are your textbooks going to cost? How much money will you need to live in, like, Boston if you end up being there? Because Boston's more expensive than some other cities or towns you could be in. What's the cost of transportation? Like, Questbridge is really comprehensive and thorough in making sure that they're going to be giving you enough money that, like, money should not affect your, like, state of mind while you're in college, because they recognize the strain that can put on you and how difficult it can be. So that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of it, because I think it's more comprehensive. Okay, let's see the next question. Are Questbridge applications reviewed in the context of other Questbridge applicants? So I think the question is asking, like, do they compare you to other applicants? And I mean, I think so, but they're not going to be like going back and forth between your application and another person's application. I think when they begin reviewing your application, they're going to be looking at you and seeing what you have to offer and what you care about, what you're passionate about, what classes you've taken, what you want to learn more about. And then, like, they're going to think about that when they're at the end of the process, once they've reviewed all the applicants. Does that sound about right, Sarah? I'm not sure how they typically do the full process.
I'm not aware of too much of the behind the scenes stuff either. If you do have more questions and concerns, you can always reach out to Questbridge. They have a really easy function where you can just, like, type in your question and then you'll get a response. The closer you do get to the deadline for submitting your application, the busier they are going to be. So it might take them a couple days to get back to you, but don't overload them. Just send it kind of one question. We also have another great question. One of the Questbridge questions asks you to list your favorite movies and books. Would it not be recommended if I listed a TV series? That's a good question. One I haven't thought too much about before, so you could argue this both ways, I feel like. I think that you'd want to kind of think about the TV series that you're thinking about, because how is it going to reflect on you if it's something that you're just watching for fun versus is this, like a documentary on space and it's a series instead. So I think it's going to be up to you about, what this TV series is and what you're taking away from it, because I think what Questbridge is really looking at when it comes to listing your favorite movies and books is really a little bit about you. So then you can make the argument for anything, truly and honestly. But then you could make the argument, it's my favorite, it doesn't matter. So You do you is the ultimate answer to that.
Maybe ask your advisor and tell them what you're thinking. Okay, so what is the least number of schools that you would recommend we rank? So I think this depends on how many schools you actually like. If you're going to rank 12 schools, then I think, like, please do the research and make sure that you really like 12 schools. I don't really think there's like a least number that you should do. I think if you really love one school and you only want to rank one school, then that makes complete sense for you. And then you could also, like, I've had students who have thought about not ranking any schools and just going straight to the regular decision process because they didn't like the binding aspect of it. And I don't know if that's like makes sense for everyone because the application's pretty intensive. So if there's no school that you want to rank, then it may not be worth all your time, but also it could be if you really want to go through the regular decision Questbridge application. So yeah, I think the least number is going to be whatever is right for you and however many schools you like.
And that right number, I think like Julianna said before, it could be 0. And you're just going through to become a Questbridge finalist and apply regular decision just as a finalist. So great question. What are the pros/cons to applying to the match instead of early action and early decision? So there's a couple different ways that you can use Questbridge to benefit yourself. And so I think it's important to highlight those ahead of time. So if you're using the match, then you're able to apply early decision, which is binding with the exception of MIT, to multiple different schools, which is different than just applying ED to one school because it's really that only option. Whereas this, it gives you the ability to really like spread your options a little bit further. Early action is another great option for students. And it does allow you to apply to other schools early as well, so you find out earlier. But it can take a little while to get your financial aid sometimes. It's not going to be binding. That could be a plus or a minus, depending on your situation. For some students, definitely having a binding aspect to their college application is not something that they want to have. They don't want to take a risk with that because they really want to be able to pick the school that's their first choice and know where they get accepted. So I think it really depends on your situation. It's also possible that with applying early decision, it's more likely for you to get accepted into that college or university. I think a great example of this is Washington University in St. Louis. With their early application portal, I do believe that they accept 70% of their students early for their freshman class. So hopefully this answers all of your questions about the difference between early action and early decision and Questbridge match.
Okay, so I see a great question about financial aid. If you possibly have a higher EFC, would that be reasoning not to get accepted into the match, but wouldn't get in the way of Questbridge regular decision, right? So EFC is your expected family contribution, which is what the number you'll get from Fafsa about how much money they think your family can put towards your college education for that year. And you have to fill it out every single year if you're eligible for it. That's a really great question. So one thing is, in order to become a finalist, you have those like academic requirements, but there also are financial requirements. So if your EFC is going to be on the higher end of the spectrum, then that may prevent you from becoming a finalist. So while it wouldn't get in the way of you matching, and you could be fine in the regular decision process, it may stop you from like even getting there through Questbridge. Does that make sense, Sarah, the way I just phrased that? Okay, and there are certain schools that will only match you if you have a 0 EFC, and those are Yale, Duke, Princeton, and Amherst. So those are good things to keep in mind. And if you're curious about what your EFC is, FAFSA will open on October 1st, and there is this tool called the Fafsa Forecaster that's not going to be around for much longer, but you could try and use it this week to get an idea of what your EFC would look like. But yeah, I would definitely meet with your advisor and have like a financial aid meeting to see if your EFC is going to get in the way of you becoming a finalist, or if you should be looking into applying to those schools early decision or early action instead of through Questbridge.
We have a follow-up question now on score reports. So without a score report from our guidance counselor, would it not allow us to submit our application? This is a question I don't really have an answer to, but you are not alone and this is something I've been working on actively today, trying to get an answer for other students that I work with. So you are not alone. There are tons of other students out there who are having difficulty contacting their guidance counselors or their teachers who are writing their recommendation letters. And it is something that Questbridge, if they don't know about already, they will definitely be learning about soon. So if you have an advisor, definitely reach out to them and let them know. And hopefully pretty soon we're going to have answers to this on what should be going on, because we know there's so many things right now happening with virtual school, getting schools back in session, getting school start dates pushed back. But just keep in mind, it's not just you, it's not just your guidance counselor. And they're probably very overwhelmed right now. So it's nothing personal. It's just a really busy time right now.
Okay. Since the date of the match results and the due date of Questbridge regular decision form are very close to each other, would you recommend for finalists to work on their Questbridge regular decision apps while waiting for results in case they don't get matched? I absolutely would recommend doing that. And I would also recommend working on applications for like schools that are not Questbridge partners. So your safety schools and your match schools that have the higher acceptance rates, just because the end of the year ends up having like a mad rush of things you need to do. And also you can reuse your essays that you use for Questbridge or use for supplements. Like, work smarter, not harder. You don't need to start from scratch each time you start working on an application. So yeah, definitely, I think making a list for yourself at the beginning of the month of December and kind of figuring out, what do I need to make sure I complete? And the worst thing that happens is that you like end up getting into a school through regular decision process and decide that you don't want to apply anywhere else. And that's good.
All right, I'm going to take it back to the top. When we click on the school for Questbridge TUFS and it says to wait until the app is submitted for supplements, what do we do? That sounds like you have to be a finalist before TUFS will let you see their supplemental information. The secret here is that most schools, now don't quote me on this and then get mad when it's wrong, but most schools reuse their supplements from year to year, so you can just Google it and figure out what it is. You could also do all of your other supplements ahead of time and just do TUFS in that gap period as well if you have all the other ones taken care of already.
Okay. Are Questbridge applicants admitted separate from other Common App applicants? So you're using two different application portals. You're using the Questbridge application versus the Common App. So it is a separate process than how Common App typically works with the regular deadlines.
We've got another great question. Are there any conflicts with applying to both Gates and Questbridge? So Gates is another scholarship opportunity for students. It's a last dollar scholarship, which just means that Gates will take a look at where you've decided to go in the spring and figure out how much money you need to cover that. So if you have a gap, which means how much money your family can pay versus how much the school is expecting you to pay, Gates will step in and cover that gap. So there are not any true conflicts, I would argue. Correct me if I'm wrong, Juliana. I don't think there's any conflicts with applying to both, but if you get in through Questbridge and you're a match recipient, you're not going to have a gap. They're not just going to give you more money just because they like you. Unfortunately, they'll give it to another student who's needy. So most of the time, if you're a Questbridge match recipient, you'd let Gates know, and they'll be like, all right, thank you for applying, but we're going to go with somebody else.
And I know there's another scholarship called Posse, and you can apply to Questbridge and Posse at the same time. And there is a certain stage where you have to decide which one you want to move forward with. And so I think Posse has 3 rounds, right? And it's like the 3rd round you have to decide. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah. Once Posse starts becoming binding is when you'd need to decide. And it would have to be Questbridge and Posse, I think, are both binding at that point. So if you've gone through Posse, because I think Posse is a little bit earlier, if anybody here is also applying to Posse, you're probably going ahead and entering the binding stage earlier than you would be with Questbridge. So you can keep going through the binding process with Posse until you get to the binding portion with Questbridge, and then you'll have to make that decision. So it does give you a little bit of time.
And then what happens if your family's income changes significantly one year? Will you still be eligible for the match? That's a great question. I think it depends on how significantly you mean. So Questbridge is guaranteed for the full 4 years. However, like if your family won the lottery, I do not think you would continue to receive it. I don't totally know exactly what the match, like what the cutoff would be. And I think maybe if you have an idea of how much you anticipate your income to change, maybe emailing Questbridge and saying like, this is my income this year, it could be this next year. Like, do you think that that would change the scholarship process? And also, technically, Questbridge isn't giving you the money. Your scholarship is coming from the institution that you're attending, just to make it more complicated. Is that right, Sarah? Or is there a cutoff that you know of?
There's not a cutoff that I know of, but because these schools that are through the match meet 100% of financial need, they'll just take into consideration how much your income has changed and how much your need has changed throughout each year. So it could be that for your first year, they estimate that you can pay $500 to attend college, but then let's say you do win the lottery. It's not a huge amount, but it's definitely enough to make a difference. Then maybe they'll say, okay, now that you've got some money in the bank, instead of paying $80,000, we'll just ask that you pay like $50,000 instead. So they won't like kick you out of college or anything. You'll just have to pay more money potentially to go to college. All right. Do they ever extend the deadline for Questbridge finalist applications? Ooh, this is a good question. I don't know if they've ever done that. It has happened with other scholarships in the past. It's happened with college applications in the past. Julianna, do you want to chime in on this one? She says no.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you thought.
Okay.
I don't think it has ever changed.
I would be surprised.
Actually, last year, I think if you lived in, I think there was a hurricane somewhere, and if you lived in the states affected by the hurricane, then they gave you like an extra week. I remember that happening.
Yeah, normally with natural disasters and things that are outside of students' control, unfortunately, COVID is probably not going to count in the situation just because we've kind of known about it for several months now. We've been living this new normal. But if you do live in an area, potentially areas affected by the wildfires, I know we've got a lot of hurricanes rolling through the East Coast. So it is possible. Also with the CSS profile, good time to chime this in. If you do live in an area with a state of emergency, the CSS profile will waive fees if you don't qualify for fee waivers already for students living in affected areas.
Okay, can you explain more about how we get to the point to be able to apply through Questbridge regular decision? Yeah, so basically the way it's going to work is you will apply to be a finalist, and then you hear back if you're a finalist. And once you become a finalist, you have the opportunity to rank schools, and say you either rank 5 schools or you don't rank any schools. After that point, you're able to apply through the regular decision process. So if you match, you can't do regular decision because you're like paired with a school and you're done. But if you rank schools and you don't match, you can apply for regular decision. Or if you decide not to rank any schools, then you can apply for the regular decision process. The biggest barrier, I guess, in between you and applying through the Questbridge regular decision process is becoming a finalist. And so that's the first deadline that you have. And I believe that's the 26th, but let me double check. Yeah, 29th. Is that good, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Is ED through Questbridge more competitive than ED through the Common App? Great question. Very thoughtful question. I would argue that it's less competitive to apply through Questbridge than it would be to apply through Common App, because there's fewer students who are going to qualify through Questbridge compared to all the students who are applying through the Common App. And you sort of get like the special tag that you are applying through Questbridge, and that's going to be both for the match portion and for regular decision. That having that tag of Questbridge on your application basically holds a little bit extra weight compared to other applicants. And I think when we were looking at the numbers beforehand, we're looking at about a 20% acceptance rate, roughly. Now, it's been a long time since I've been in a math class, but if we're looking at about like 5,000 students are finalists and then 1,000 students get matched, then that's definitely probably a little bit more, a little easier to get into a Questbridge school than it is going to be just to do ED.
So one question I get a lot is, does citizenship play a role in Questbridge applications? And it does for a few schools. So every school except for UVA and USC will look at undocumented students' applications, and UVA is the only school that will not match with undocumented or DACA students. So there are some schools that do consider international students, do not consider international students, but they do consider undocumented students. So the schools that will not accept or match with international students would be Caltech, Dartmouth, Duke, Oberlin, Scripps, Stanford, and Notre Dame. And if you have more questions about the role that citizenship plays in the college process, definitely check out their website, email Questbridge, or talk with your advisor.
Good point there. All right, are we at a disadvantage to get into our ranked schools if we do Questbridge instead of ED? As I am assuming that schools have a limited number of Questbridge applicants that they let in. This is a kind of a continuation of the point that I was talking about before, that it is technically a little bit easier to get into a Questbridge school. And then as well, Julianna brought up the point earlier that it also depends on the schools that you're ranking. So there's probably, if you're looking at the list of Questbridge partner schools, there's definitely going to be at least one school that you've never heard of before. And these schools are just, people don't apply to them as much compared to some of those big brand name schools that you've definitely heard about, Harvard, Yale. Harvard is not a match school, but Yale definitely is. Brown, Dartmouth, these schools are definitely, they hold that name recognition. So I hope this answers your question. I'm going to reread it quickly and make sure I got everything. When it comes to just the number of applicants that they have, there's definitely schools that admit fewer students than others just because they're a smaller school in general. They might only have 1,500 students, so they can't let in a significant portion. They don't have the funding potentially to have all of their students be Questbridge students. But I think you could do a lot of research if you did have more questions and figure it out. I do believe they published some great information on this. Anything to add, Julianna?
No, I think you covered it all really well. Okay, I see. Is it possible to change the match rankings after October 15th when we rank up to 12 college partners? No. So once you submit your rankings, that's permanent. So make sure that when you list a school, you feel really confident and you feel really sure that that's a school that you would want to go to.
Okay, so great question. Definitely not a dumb question. There's no such thing as a dumb question if it's bringing you any sort of knowledge or expertise. So, but if I'm at the top 10.03% at my school, should I put top 10% or top 15%? Do you also know? So let's start off with this one. You can put top 10%. That would be somebody who is really mean in admissions, and I've never really met a really mean admissions person. So I definitely think you're safe with this top 10 selection. Do you also know if Questbridge considers school ranks relative to your high school student population? I know that schools do. So Questbridge is just the application portal. So schools, and we're talking about the college or university at this level, they take a look at your high school, or technically a homeschool, but it's really your high school. They'll take a look at your high school and sort of see where it ranks nationally, and what sort of support structures you have at place. So they're definitely taking a look to figure out what the highest level of coursework that you're able to take at that school. So they do know a little bit about the schools that you're attending. So if you're going to a giant high school, they'll definitely be able to see that and be like, okay, so this is, this is great. But also they'll be able to take a look and see if you're at a really small school, and if, top 10 is just 2 students. So I think it really depends. I wouldn't say one is worse than the other one. So don't get worried about that.
Okay. Do you recommend reusing your Questbridge essay for the Common App? Will colleges see that you're sending the same essay? I definitely think if your Questbridge essay meets the prompt that you're responding to on the Common App, that you can reuse it, unless it explicitly states that you can't. The only time that I would be careful about reusing essays is if you wrote one about like why Duke, and then you're responding to like why Vanderbilt, and then you don't change anything but just like the name of the school. Because colleges can see through that, and they know that you're not really talking about them in that situation. And I also had a really, really bad experience last year where a student forgot to change the name of the school in that essay, in the application. So she sent in like her why Duke, and it said Vanderbilt instead in the supplement, and she did not get into Duke. But yeah, I think as long as there's nothing saying like do not reuse essays, then you definitely can do that, especially because you work hard on your Questbridge essays. And like if you feel like it's your best work and you're really proud of it and it's showing who you are, you can definitely reuse that for the rest of your Common App applications.
Yes, I stand behind that fully and say that reuse those supplements too. If it's a similar prompt that you're getting for 2 different schools, definitely take the bulk of what you've got in one and just reformat it, refresh it a little bit to make sure that it aligns with the new prompt, and save yourself some time and, stress, because I like to think that everybody loves writing essays, but I know it's not everybody's favorite thing to do. So definitely save yourself a little bit of time there. Great question coming in about changing family dynamics. So because my mom is single, if she were to get married and he makes almost 6 figures, would that change or affect me? And that's a really good question to think about. And the answer there is yes, it will in the future affect you. Because right now, since you're applying now, you'll be using a different tax year. So when the parent, so the mom and we'll call him for this situation, let's call him Ted. We don't know the relationship. Mom and Ted get married. For when they file taxes potentially together for the future years, that's going to be reflected on the new FAFSA, and that's going to be information sent to the schools in the future. So we're seeing a pretty similar thing to what happened before with the questions of changes in family income increasing. So it would be expected that this new Ted, he would be contributing to your college education. We can't give you advice, unfortunately, on how this is going to shape, but I think it's important for you to know, maybe have a conversation and talk to your advisor.
So I see another question asking if we can explain the regular decision at Questbridge process. So basically, if you do become a finalist, you have the option to apply through the regular decision Questbridge portal. And basically that gives you a couple benefits. You have the distinction of being a Questbridge finalist, which like we said, that's 5,000 out of 15,000 applicants. So that really shows a lot about you and like your competitiveness. Additionally, you're able to join the Questbridge network of scholars, which can be really helpful in the future when you're looking for internships or jobs. And you also get to use your Questbridge essays, which sometimes I don't know if everyone has started working on them, but they have some kind of like weird questions that let you get a little bit more into your personality and talk more about yourself. And so you're able to sometimes send more essays over to the school than you would if you were applying through the common application. I think that's everything that's really important about the regular decision Questbridge process. Sarah, do you think that I'm missing anything?
No, I think you covered pretty much everything, all the good stuff. So next we have a question. For the Questbridge application, they ask you to list testing and honors, and then they also have a section for achievements and extracurriculars. Do I repeat it in both, or do I just differentiate it depending on if I received it in the club that I was in? So this is another great question. And definitely feel free to put some input on this, Juliana. But I would say keep them different. You don't want to repeat anything because that's just longer for the admissions to take a look at your work. And they don't like to spend more time than they need to. It's definitely always a negative if you give them more work to do than less. So definitely think about what is going to fit best in which section. If it's truly just, an honors, so like you are on the principal's, A+ list, or, you got first place in the science fair, just figure out which one might fit best. And if you do have questions, you're like, I really have no idea, talk to your advisor.
Okay, do you list Questbridge as a CBO on your application if you were a college prep scholar? So I think you mean community-based organization, and I'm not sure if you would list Questbridge, but you can list College Advising Corps and College Point if you want to. I don't think it would hurt anything to list Questbridge as a CBO if you were a college prep scholar. I don't know if it would really add anything, and also they'll know that I'm assuming you would put that you were a prep scholar on your application in some other point, so I don't know if it would really add a lot for you to have that on your app. But yeah, I'm too easy.
Yeah, definitely feel free to add us. We like it. Okay, if not many people list a certain school as their top choice, does that increase the chances of getting matched? And yes, it does. We've answered this, I think, a couple different times, but I think this is super important to make sure it really hits home. To take a look at these schools that you haven't heard about before, that you might not really think of, and like, oh, this school called Middlebury, what do they do? And really see, because these are really great elite institutions that their name really holds a lot of value, and you can get a phenomenal education for, and they're great, honestly. They might be a little bit of rural, so definitely take a look and figure out if you're going to like it, but it can increase your chances of getting matched if that's going to be a top priority for you.
So I see, as an add-on to the question above, so I think that's the one you just answered, what if you don't know your school ranking? Are you thinking, Sarah, what are you nodding?
So if you're from Texas, I hope you're from Texas. This is this is something that's really common in Texas. But also in schools across the U.S., where a school will not tell you what your ranking is because they don't want to increase competition along students, especially in Texas, for automatic admission to public schools. So talk to your counselor, and if your guidance counselor at your school, if you don't know what your ranking is and your school has rankings and they can let you know. If your school does not have rankings, they do not tell you until after you graduate what your ranking is, then Questbridge will figure that out. You don't need to put that information on there. It's obviously information you can't have.
Thank you. Okay, if we get matched with a school that is not our top choice, will it still be binding? Yes. So if you don't feel really confident in that school, like if you know you only want to go to your top choice, then only rank your top choice. Yeah.
If I started an activity the summer after 9th grade before sophomore year, would I indicate it starting in 10th grade? Interesting. I think it would depend on the situation. I don't know, Julian, if you have any input.
Well, I can't remember on the application if you do the grade that you started it or if you do like the month and year that you started working on it. Because if you did the month and year, that could be a little bit more precise. But if you do the grade, I'm not sure.
I think, thinking about this logically, if you're technically not in 10th grade. So you're technically still a 9th grader, one might argue, until you start 10th grade. So I think you could put 10th or 9th grade.
Especially maybe if you plan to do it the summer after you graduate as well. Will Questbridge prefer someone who is ranked 10 out of 1,500 students or someone who is 1 out of 300? I think Sarah really did a great job explaining this earlier, but they understand that there are different situations and that you can't really control the size of the population at your school. So I don't think you need to really overthink that too much. Yeah, you are who you are, and you go to school where you go to school. You can't change that.
On my transcript, it says my weighted GPA is 6 point, great numbers afterwards. What do I put for the value it's out of on the application? So I'm assuming your GPA is out of 7, which is not unusual. So you can see if they have an option to put what your GPA is out of on your application. So you could do like a 3.98 out of 4, but you could also potentially do your 6.6 out of 7, because there's also like 100-point scales as well out there. You can also convert your GPA online. They do have converters out there. You can also potentially talk to your guidance counselor and see if they will convert it on your behalf.
Okay. Is Rice a very, oh no. Uh-oh. Okay, is Rice a very competitive school to get matched to? I think something like all of these schools are very competitive, but I would definitely rank Rice if you're interested in going to it. It's a wonderful institution, and yeah, I don't know if it would be like up in the top 10 of the most competitive schools on Questbridge, but I'm not sure if they release the information for which schools are ranked the most often. But yeah, I would rank it if you like it.
I would rank it if you like it too. If I had the opportunity to go back and apply to colleges again, absolutely I would rank Rice. Absolutely beautiful. If you don't know what I'm talking about, take some time, treat yourself, go on a virtual tour of Rice and just experience the magic. All right, I'm a bit confused. If we apply to Questbridge, we won't know if we got in for some time. So should we apply to schools in the meantime, like actually send the applications? Great, fantastic question. So you might live in a state where you're going to have to submit your applications to your public schools because they're going to be due early than compared to when you're going to hear back from Questbridge. So like Florida's a good case. California is a good case as well for where this is going to happen. There are some restrictions on if you're able to apply to other schools, because technically this is going to be a binding process. So you are allowed to apply to other colleges and universities that are going to be home state publics, and correct me if I'm wrong, Julianna, because it's been a while since I've looked at this, but that are going to be public schools in your home state. You can also technically apply early to other colleges that are not binding if they have a special scholarship program that you need to apply early for, or if there's a special program like an honors college that you want to be a part of that you need to apply early for as well. Is there anything I'm missing here, Julianna?
I do not think there is.
Okay.
Okay, I see a really great question. My father doesn't support us financially and he lives outside of the US. Will I need to report his income? So this is a really complicated situation, and Questbridge knows that, but unfortunately the CSS profile typically does require all of the financial information from both parents. However, there is the request for non-custodial parent waiver, which basically is a form you fill out saying he doesn't support us financially, like, would you allow me not to report his income? And I will actually drop a link to that in the chat so you can look at it later and start working on that process. But just going forward, I would try to be a little bit more ahead of schedule with things, just because financial aid forms do get really complicated when you have to deal with complicated situations.
And if you do have questions about getting your non-custodial parent waiver forms in, talk to your advisor. They've definitely worked in the situation before, and talk to your guidance counselor.
Also, there are certain schools that do not require non-custodial parent information, like the University of Chicago. They've just come out and said, like, your non-custodial parent doesn't have to send us anything, because we know that that's really difficult. So you could look for those schools, especially if you don't get approved the request. And you could also email the admissions offices or financial aid offices at other schools and try to encourage them to incorporate that policy as well.
Yeah, and let the colleges know your situation. I mean, it's not just robots behind the screen. These are actual people. And if you explain your situation and explain what's happening, I think they really try to do the best that they can in supporting you where you need support. So definitely don't worry. All right. Does having more college prep programs put you at a disadvantage because you have more prep? I would not say so. That you're just getting support where you need support. Do you have anything to add to that, Juliana? I would just say no, it doesn't disadvantage you at all. You're taking advantage of, you're showing initiative to get support where you might need just like somebody to ask questions to.
Yeah, and I think that's also showing that, like, you're the type of person who will look for resources when you need them, and college can be very difficult, and there are a lot of resources on college campuses, and sometimes students don't always take advantage of them, so I definitely don't think it would ever hurt you in the process. Okay, what if you don't have school rankings? So I think that's referring to if you choose not to rank any schools once you're a finalist with Questbridge, and if you don't rank any schools, then you won't be matched, but then you can apply to whatever partner schools you want to through the regular decision process within Questbridge.
So quick question here. If I were to get matched to Rice and get into the Rice Baylor program, would Questbridge cover it? I'm assuming you're talking about the pre-med track through Baylor and Rice. Then Questbridge is not going to cover that because it's going to be for Rice only. You could potentially ask and see. I don't remember if it's you go to Rice first and then Baylor add-ons a couple years, but it's going to be 4 years to Rice. And the Rice to Baylor program, the Rice Baylor pre-med program is very, very competitive. So just know what you're getting in beforehand.
Is a 1400 SAT good enough to submit to a more elite college like Princeton, etc., or is it at least better than nothing? I think a 1400 is great, especially considering the current circumstances with testing and how difficult it's been for testing, how sometimes there just aren't any dates, or sometimes the dates get canceled, or the added stress of like taking the SAT right now in the middle of a pandemic. So I would definitely report a 1400 if I was applying to Questbridge. Sarah, do you agree?
Absolutely. I think we should all step back, take a round of applause for ourselves on our SAT and our ACT scores, because you worked so hard to get these scores, and these are absolutely phenomenal scores that you've gotten. And so I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up and, oh, I only have a 1400, and then it's like, well, actually a 1400 is phenomenal. And it's this year, it's weird. And schools do take into consideration that you might only have been able to take a test once, and the likelihood that you increase your test score with a second test is huge, potentially even with a third test if you have been able to take two. So schools know this. Do I need to submit all of my AP test scores, or can I just select the ones that I want to send? And the question is, you can select the ones that you want to send. I do have that right, Juliana?
I think so. And typically I recommend only sending scores that are 4s or 5s.
Yeah.
Because also, like, the grade you got in your AP class, I think, is more important than the score you get on the test. Because the test is really just going to be used to determine if you can place out of that intro level course once you get to college. The score, and like your grade in the class as a whole, is going to show how you did throughout a whole semester of work.
And just because you test out of a class due to your AP score doesn't mean that you shouldn't take it when you're in college, especially if you're going to a school where you feel like, oh, this might be a little easy. Then you could get to college, especially if you're going to a really elite school, then you might want to just give yourself the space just to relearn that information, so then you have everything that you need to be successful in your higher level coursework. You have that really strong foundation. And there's no shame in retaking courses. Is actually, you know, it could be a little bit helpful in like padding your GPA, potentially just giving you that really strong foundation, so that when you get into those courses, you're not freaking out, maybe a little bit going, oh, my chemistry teacher did not teach us this.
Do we have time to do more questions? Should we keep going?
I think we could answer a couple more.
Okay, awesome. So I think the next one was also about AP scores. Yeah, and you don't have to add your AP scores if you indicate that you take AP classes, like Sarah just said. Then, okay, I think this is about an earlier question. Sorry, Mint, if your school doesn't rank you among other students. So Sarah, this was what you were talking about earlier with Texas, about how sometimes schools don't let you know what your rank is, and you can email your guidance counselor or call them or go to their office if you're having in-person classes. But if they don't tell you what your rank is, there's not a lot you can do to control that. And you can indicate that on Questbridge. There's an information section where it says like additional information you want to tell us. You can communicate that to them in that little box.
And very rarely are you the only student who's going through this problem, or like whenever you're thinking, oh gosh, how do I do this? My school is unique, or this happens. You're definitely not the only school that has something like that, and you're not the only student. So don't worry too much. Google can definitely be your friend when Googling what to do in a situation. And if you do have an advisor, definitely reach out to them. They've probably worked on a similar situation before.
And I saw in the chat, someone said their school just doesn't rank at all. Your counselor can include that in the school profile when they talk about your school, because your counselor has to send something in being like, this school is in this town, in this state, and has this big of a population, and we have these policies that are specific to us. And so they would just say that there.
Yes, it's definitely not uncommon to have a school that just does not rank at all. They don't have their students ranked. They don't even have it for after graduation. It's not like a secret process that they have behind the scenes. They'll let somebody know. It's really not uncommon. So you're in good hands. All right, I can take the next question. When you add a College Board SAT score report, all of your SATs get shown. The first time I got pretty low. Should I still send it? You don't have to send all of your SAT scores. There's ways to exclude it. Off the top of my head, I don't know, but this is definitely something that you can Google, or potentially somebody else could answer for you if they know off the top of their head right now. But yeah, just do a quick Google, figure out. It should be super simple. Or talk to your advisor later.
I also think that if you go up substantially in your test score, that's like an upward trend, and that shows that you worked really hard. And also, like, so much of testing has to do with how you were feeling the day you took it. You know, if you didn't get a lot of sleep, if you didn't like eat a good breakfast, if you're having just like an off day, then you're not going to do super well in a test. And also, testing is not indicative of intelligence, and like, you are so much more than your test score. So yeah, I would, if you show it, I think it shows that you worked really hard, but you can also just choose not to.
Yeah, that's definitely the case.
Okay, I think we're going to do one more question each, and then we're going to finish up for today. But also, you can all go to our YouTube channel and list questions in the comments, and we'll respond to them as soon as we see them. So for the last one, I'm going to do, it's going to be, do you know if you're compared to other applicants or your classmates that are applying too? That's a really good question. I think there's a strong possibility that Questbridge probably groups applicants who have similar circumstances together when they're reviewing them. But again, I haven't sat in the room when they've decided who becomes a finalist, but could see them looking at students who went to similarly sized schools and have similar GPAs and that kind of thing when they're deciding what to do. Do you have anything to add to that, Sarah?
No, I think it's hard to know the behind the scenes stuff for us because we aren't in the room when these decisions are being made. We don't work at admissions, we're just advisors. So,
You know, it can definitely be pretty nerve-wracking if you're applying and also your friends are as well. And I think a good thing is kind of to like support each other and to hype each other up and like be there for that. But also like it's not a competition, but it can start to feel that way. And like you are a great student and you've got so much to bring, and like Questbridge may be the right thing for you, but it may not, and that's totally okay.
and I think something else that can sometimes get in your mind a little bit if you're looking on Naviance and you're able to see how many other students at your school apply to these schools each year and how many got denied, how many got accepted. And it can really get in your head and you're like, oh my gosh, I could never apply to Harvard because, you know, only one student has ever gotten in from my school. And knowing that everyone's individual, I mean, everybody else could have bombed their essays. We don't know. We don't know what was going through their head. We don't know how special they were. I mean, you guys are really incredible applicants. So I think if it's something that you're interested, take that shot, because otherwise you're never going to know, and you could be that second student from your school to go to Harvard. So never count yourself out.
Also, if you do have friends that are also low income and high achieving and want help throughout the college application process, they can go to our Instagram, because we do have space for more students this year and are happy to support as many people as possible. So I think we're gonna end it for tonight. Unless, Sarah, is there anything else you want to say?
Other than just thanks everybody for joining, and thanks to all of my students who came. I saw your names in the chat. I wasn't ignoring you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good luck with your application, and just make sure to reach out to your advisor or post in the comments on our YouTube page, and hopefully we'll see you next month to talk about college lists.